Good morning. Barry Bryson here. Thank you for joining me for another 5 good minutes with the Word. We're continuing our study of the book of First Peter, and we really have gotten to the heart of the entire book. It is the geometric center of the book, and it really is the heart of the book, what the book is about. Because this is a book about surviving persecution, and this is the topic at the end of chapter 3. It's the topic of the whole book, really. But he's getting down to basics. When you are hauled in and interrogated, and when you are being treated unfairly, when they're making legal accusations against you, this is what you need to do. This is how you survive. And the first thing is sanctify Christ as Lord in your heart. The second thing is to give an answer of the hope that's in you with gentleness and reverence. And the third thing is to keep a good conscience, to be a good person, a good citizen, a good disciple, so that when people accuse you of things, it just sounds ridiculous because you're not the kind of person who would do those things. And that's the program. And then he gives us Jesus again as an example. For Christ also died for sins once for all, the just for the unjust, in order that he might bring us to God, having been put to death in the flesh, but made alive in the Spirit, in whom also he went and made proclamation to spirits who are now in prison, who once were disobedient when the patience of God kept waiting in the days of Noah during the construction of the ark, in which a few, that is, 8 persons, were brought safely through the water. And corresponding to that, baptism saves you now. Doesn't matter what the Romans do to you. You've been baptized, and you're saved. Not the removal of dirt from the flesh, but an appeal to God for a good conscience through the resurrection of Jesus Christ, who is at the right hand of God, having gone into heaven after angels and authorities and powers have been subjected to him. There's so much here. We visit the realm beyond life on earth twice because we are reminded of the spirits who are now in prison. And then we talk about Jesus, who is right now at the right hand of God, having gone into heaven. And we're also reminded of who's in charge. Angels and authorities and powers have been subjected to Jesus. He's the one who has ultimate authority. But he's also the one who sacrificed for us. He was the one who was falsely accused, falsely convicted, falsely executed, and that accomplished our salvation. And if we find ourselves in the same spot, we are finding ourselves in the place of a disciple, following the same path that Jesus followed. And as he has alluded to before, that sacrificial life itself is what will win others to Christ. Offering ourselves up as sacrifice, living sacrificially for others, not winning arguments, is what brings others, to Christ. And that's made so clear now in this passage. Now, there are a couple other things we need to talk about. In verse 20, verses 19 and 20, he is not talking about Jesus making a preaching tour of hell in between his crucifixion and his resurrection. That's not what is being described at all. The truth was delivered to the people in the days of Noah, and they didn't respond to it. And now they're in prison. I mean, the verb tenses make that clear. The preaching happened in the past. The being in prison is in the present. So, this is a description of the ark as a paradigm for what's about to happen. As the ark is a paradigm for what's about to happen in 2 Peter chapter 3. In this passage, the ark is a paradigm of salvation through water that some people accepted and some people rejected. And it's interesting that the water is itself a means of salvation, and it is because the waters went higher than the highest peak, and therefore the ark itself floated safely. The point he's making is that the human race had the opportunity for an entire century to respond to the truth that was being shared with them about coming judgment, and they didn't. But those who did were saved. Period. That's the historical fact. And corresponding to this, baptism saves us now. It can't get any clearer than this. Baptism saves us now. You could say, who saved Noah? God saved Noah. Yes. The ark saved Noah. Yes. But ultimately, the water saved Noah. It was God's plan and his being obedient that saved him. He built an ark. But if the water didn't get high enough, that ark is going to founder on the peaks. The medium by which God saved Abraham in a variety of ways, not just from crashing the ark, but also from the sinful world around him, was the water that lifted the ark above, high enough, and that cleansed the planet and gave us a reboot. In the same way, the water is God's medium of salvation now. And it's not baptism the way the Jews baptized, because the Jews did baptize. Nearly every synagogue in the empire had a baptistry, because when someone converted to Judaism and became a proselyte, they were baptized. They weren't baptized for the forgiveness of their sins. They were baptized to be sanctified, to wash the Gentile off. It was a ritual cleansing of dirt from the flesh. And he's saying that's not what this is. This is not symbolic of anything. It's the thing itself. It's the moment of our salvation. It's when we, because Jesus' death, burial, and resurrection, because we access that power. And the cleansing that we get, the reboot that we get, is not from the sinful world, but from our own personal sins. And now we have a clean conscience before God. Jesus, who is in charge of everything in heaven right now, makes that so. Okay, so at the end of this part where he talks about how to survive persecution, he reminds them, Jesus is in charge and you're saved. The Romans can't do anything about that, so don't forget it. Okay, we're going to pick up with chapter 4, verse 1 next time. Thank you for joining me for another 5 good minutes with the Word.